Good evening. Welcome to our board work session for today. Mrs. Logan, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Lovell?
Here.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Here.
Mr. Pearl?
Here.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Here.
Mrs. Casper?
Here. Can you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I please have a motion to accept the agenda? So moved.
Second.
Can you call the roll, Mrs. Logan?
Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes. So our board work session tonight is on COVID update and student progress. So Mr. Miller, I am going to turn it over to you.
And as you can tell, I have Mr. Coney here as well, and he has some documents he's going to share. Just kind of want to set the stage that I appreciate the efforts again that our teachers have made, that our parents have made, and staff, along with the administrators and principals, in terms of making the most challenging year as good as possible for our students. And I think we've done that. As a recap, we've been in person since middle of August, and also offered an optional virtual learning option for our students. So one of the things that this board has asked about and we want to report out is sort of where we are with COVID and how we've done this year with students, but also what are our plans moving forward. Even though we've been in person for most of our kids since August, it's still going to be a different year and a different look. And I think that goes for all the districts across the country, quite frankly, in terms of whether they've been in person or virtual or hybrid or at some point, one of those three or all of those three this school year for them. And so it's worth us taking a look at where we are, where our students are, and what supports we need to give them, not just next school year, but also this summer as well. So Mr. Coney and the executive team have been putting things together, and Keith's team has put some things in place that he's going to share with all of you around academics, but also some of the social emotional learning supports. And it's not just a one-year fix per se coming up, but it's going to be long-term for our kids. So that's your warm-up.
Thank you, and thank the board for all the support along the way and for giving us the time this evening to kind of update everyone. As you know, the impact of the pandemic and of remote learning and virtual learning has been on everybody's minds. And the idea of learning loss has been very important to us. We've spent a lot of time, our team and the executive team, really studying that and understanding it. There are a couple of pieces of documentation I put in front of you tonight. The first is what we call the COVID impact report. We had gathered this goes back to last spring and into the fall. And what we wanted to do was understand the impact of COVID on our schools, on our learning, and on our students. And so we had been gathering this information and putting this together since the beginning of the school year. And luckily enough, the governor came out and announced that he wanted to have a plan to address that by April 1st. And the tenets of the plan that he proposed are exactly in line with everything that we had been studying all throughout the course of the year, which was gratifying to us and made it easier to come up with a plan because it was really just the formalization of what we've been doing already. So the COVID impact report that you've got is, we really looked at the beginning of the school year at last spring coming into this year, what was the impact of that learning loss over that time? And luckily we've been in person, so a lot of our data this school year has been really solid. So we've been tracking that all the way through, but we want to make sure what was the impact of last spring coming into this year and how would we adjust for that? And so we started to do our research in the fall, and we were a little bit surprised that some of the data came in. And as we started to look on a national level, it really mirrored what we saw across the country. And so we broke it down into personalized academic growth, and we talked about future ready skills tied directly into our strategic plan. And we looked at social emotional health and well-being of our kids. The academic growth, especially K through 8 that we looked at, we saw early struggles and learning loss for our earliest readers, which makes sense. There's so much skill that's taken care of with our students. In the elementary years, we actually saw about, I mean, statistically about the same amount of growth as we currently have, or as we had previously had in previous years. A lot of that is attributed across the country, and a lot of research that parents, we all felt that last spring during quarantine time, that we spent a lot of time with our kids and reading books and getting back to basics a lot of times, and time was there, and parents felt comfortable with that. And that is borne out in our research also, that our reading growth and is on par with what it has been in the past. The challenge we saw was in math. And so our math growth is not as strong as it was in the past. And so we have really addressed that, the entire fall. We've added additional supports. What we've broken this down is the methodology, the data, and then our response. And our response has really been around supporting our struggling learners that are coming back. We've done some things long-term that you'll see in the report that we present to the state.
Mr. Keeney,
Yes.
could we put this up on the screen for our community to see what you're talking about? this morning? Do we
I
have that
do not
here?
have it electronically. I'm sorry. I
Okay,
can.
We can put it up after.
okay. I
Yeah.
think that'd be helpful to attach it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Really want you guys to see it first.
And appreciate that.
So that's the academic growth, the responses that we've got to our academic growth, mostly K-8. We've added additional intervention teachers, which was part of the CARES Act funding from last year. We dedicated specific VLO reading intervention for the second semester, knowing that that was a gap that we had seen first semester. In all honesty, it's hard to get good assessment data for kids who are learning virtually for standardized testing. Most of our standardized testing partners have tried to come up with something for virtual. It's not ideal. And classroom data is much better for that. So we've kind of invested in reading intervention teachers for our VLO support. We've revamped our intervention system. It's called multi-tiered systems of support, which is research-based and really gets to each of the individual kids that we've got. We've implemented that in all K-8 schools this school year. And we focused on math intervention for second semester, knowing that these results were what they were. A lot of that work is systems work and professional development with teachers. We've been doing that since about October as that data started to roll in, and we're probably fully in place in all K-8 buildings at this point in time. The second impact was future ready preparation. What we looked at mostly there was our students making progress towards graduation. And a lot of that had to do with students failing courses. And first semester, knowing that students were out of school last spring, and we had a number of students learning virtually because they had to, not because they chose to. We did have a significant number of failures in our high schools, which then leads to graduation concerns. Again, this is nothing unique to Lakota. Almost every single school district we've talked with throughout this school year has experienced the same thing. It's just a challenge to be able to, the students are engaged, they are participating, but just having them in class is different than having them at home. We've done a number of things with that. We have brought a number of students back in person. We've developed an entire credit recovery action team that meets every other week with all of our administrators at the high school level, all of our counselors. We have a massive spreadsheet with every single student on it who is in danger of failing. We talk about individual kids on a weekly basis. We have mentors mentors and coaches for every single student who's on that spreadsheet. And they are updating that on a bi-weekly basis to know not only how are they doing with their credit recovery, but are we keeping them from getting further in the hole during second semester? It truly is one of those sort of processes that we're putting in place that will feed us going forward, and something we'll keep implementing in the future also. We've seen success with that. We just got our third quarter data back, and our success rate is increased because of the work that we're doing. We'll continue to see that in fourth quarter and into next year. And we've also added some staff members to support the VLO for the reach out to those kids, and we are looking at ways to include that with the rest of the school year and into next year also. The third piece is the social emotional health and well-being of our students. And I broke this down. These are just trend data that we have from some surveys that we do with our students each year. Some promising things that our elementary and junior high school students feel engaged by the adults who are with them. They have strong relationships with the adults who they're close to, and they feel like there's a strong school culture, which is fantastic. Concerning trends, which I think everybody has concerns about this with high school kids, is the level of engagement and the relationships they have with their peers. They feel like they're disconnected from their peers. We've shared this information with our high school staff. Obviously, concerns that we have about mental health of our students is paramount at the high school level. Also, they have action teams in place. They've been reaching out to individual students in need. This is something we'll track over long term and see if this is an ongoing trend or something that is one time in nature. And the last thing I put on the back there is some of the unintended catalysts, we call them, things we've learned through the pandemic that we will continue on. Well, we've gotten pretty good at utilizing technology to engage teachers and parents in conversations. We developed an entire coursework of model courses to serve our virtual learners. And that really has become sort of a bedrock of instruction for our teachers also. So those are all things that we've learned through the pandemic that will serve us in the future. What we've done then is we took the COVID impact report, and that has fed the other document that you got is the report that we submit to Governor DeWine. And it really does model the same things. So it asks, how are you identifying academic needs? It breaks it down this spring, this summer, into next school year, and the summer and the school year beyond. As I said, a lot of the things you'll see in the report to the governor are exactly the same things that are in our COVID impact report. It's what we're doing. A lot of the budget pieces that are in there are either NAs because they're just system work that we're doing, or the things that don't necessarily have a dollar sign next to them, but they have pieces that we know that we're going to be including. And a lot of that comes into our ESSER funding that we are, actively planning and working on. So really, it looks at identifying academic needs, addressing those academic needs, and then serving students social emotional needs and addressing those needs also. So all of those pieces are in there. We are developing and looking to support some of our kids with some really targeted intervention work and targeted support and liaison work. We work with Butler County ESC very closely with that, trying to target some of our disengaged students, trying to help some of our ESL students put systems in place for we know that math gap is going to continue on. And so we are looking at how to address that long term. The other big piece that we are looking at is this summer. And so we are building out a pretty robust summer tutoring program that will be, the plan is to have it be 2 sections, one early summer, one late summer, addressing our students who have been more disengaged and our struggling learners on a smaller student to teacher ratio at the beginning of the summer, and then sort of on-ramp for school for next year, especially for those students who have been out of a classroom for a while or might have been disengaged. We are talking about serving our top 10 most neediest students. And it will require a lot of teacher support and a lot of administrative support, but that's really the purpose of the ESSER funding is to address that need. Luckily, we've got the data, we've got buy-in from the teachers and the administrators and the support they've been providing all year, and they're actually eager to try and work toward that. So our plans from now until the end of the school year are to put that in place so they're ready to go by June to support those students.
Including K6.
I'm sorry?
Including K6.
Yeah, so there's a K6, this is K6, and we traditionally do a 7-12 summer school that for students who have not earned credit or for students who are looking for original credit. That will probably be a little bit larger program this year, to be honest. But we should be able to serve K through 12 this summer and into next school year. That's a lot, I know. Talked fast. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Quick question, how are you going to get the kids who are not as engaged to get engaged for the summer programs in order to catch up or try to catch up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any
Yeah,
idea
that's been a big challenge of ours, is trying to get those kids there. So a couple of things. Transportation is important, so we'll provide transportation for those students to be able to get there. Also doing this in coordination with our summer lunch program to try and find one common location so that if families are coming to pick up meals, they can also be able to have their students right there if they're traveling for them. We also have pretty good connections. They might not be engaged, but they at least have a connection with a teacher. So making sure that teacher's reaching out to that kid. We know that face-to-face is going to be very important for them. We hope that families will trust us to be able to bring their kids into school, especially those who've been learning from home. We've started that conversation of how do we reach those kids throughout the
That's a
summer.
challenge.
It is.
But you're already thinking about it. That's good. Thank you.
Keith, do we have any students in the high school that are in jeopardy of not graduating? And what do
We did the changes to graduation requirements last week already have helped. And so we are really down to almost a handful at each campus. And that really is just if they are meeting the graduation requirements. So it's not based on testing or based on certifications or seals or anything like that. So
we're working
That
with
helps.
those students?
yes, I mean, we're down, I think it's 3 on 1 and 5 on the other campus. We know them, they have plans in place, all of that.
Okay.
Yes.
With our summer school program, do we usually charge tuition for that?
We do.
And will that continue, or are we going to use some of the
So-
additional funds, or?
I'm sorry. Yeah, so we have, it's tricky because some of our summer schools for original credit, which wouldn't necessarily be something we would waive.
Right.
Some is for credit recovery. So I think that's something we've had conversations about. How do you parse those out? Some kids actually might be taking an original credit class and a credit recovery at the same time. Our goal is to not have that be a barrier for kids to be able to take the summer school if they need that. So we're having that conversation this week. So I don't think we've landed the plane on what that looks like, but
And part of it
Part of
might
the
be
big
when
process.
we hear what the ESSER 3 funds are going to be. Because that hasn't come in yet, has it?
It has not. We've had some preliminary indications, but summer school is definitely one of those areas that is permissible uses of those funds. So like Keith said, we want the student engagement, and if it's going to be a barrier, but if it's for original credit, discussions are ongoing, I guess is.
Original
point.
credit, we would still charge, correct?
We
Like,
have not decided on that yet.
if someone's taking summer gym just to take summer gym, we don't know.
We can come back with you on that.
It's just still in discussion phase.
Mhm.
It's a unique year.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It is a unique year, and it depends on how much funds we actually do get,
Right.
and
When will we know that, Jenny?
good
Good question.
I am not sure. We've gotten, like I did send something to you saying that what we were told is
Right.
it's going to be like 2.4 times what our
It was.
our SR2 was. But we have not gotten really,
The official.
no,
Okay.
we haven't. So more to come.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. You go.
I had several questions. And comments as well. First of all, just a request that when we're going to have this kind of information, that we could get it a day or two in advance so that we really have an opportunity to dig into it a little bit better and be able to ask informed questions.
Sure,
And I don't know when it was prepared, but would appreciate that opportunity.
absolutely.
You had said that you've been gathering information since the start of the school year. I'm going to pull this down for a minute so I can actually breathe. Gathering information since the start of the school year, which is great to see. We knew from the start this was going to be a year that really impacted student achievement. So thank you for that diligence.
Mhm.
It's appreciated. Just a couple of comments as I walk through this. I'm looking at 4th grade in math, and 70% is stunning to me. And we look at, 2nd grade is 12%. Have you actually studied the differences in how instructional delivery is happening? Do we understand why?
We do understand why, and it's a little bit at each grade level different. So the comparison that we used there was we looked at if they were to meet their projected growth for that grade level, those aren't always the same. So the projected growth by each grade level is not the same. So that factors a little bit into this. This is like the 3rd version of how we wanted to present this data. And the greatest concern is fourth grade. So we knew that coming in. We've spent significant time there looking at the standards coming into fourth grade, what happens there, the testing window and what's on that test and all those kind of things. I think when we hand this data over to teachers, that's when the real work happens. We can look at it from a 30,000 foot level, but the work we've been doing with our math teams at each elementary school is digging a step further into this. We broke this down by each elementary school. We've had meetings with each of those teams. And when you put that data in front of teachers, their immediate response is, well, I need to get into that. I need to know what exactly is going on there. Who are those students? So that's been the work that we've been doing. We've put a structure in place and then let the teachers dig in at the student level to figure out exactly what's going on. So I don't have all of the answers of what's happening at that individual fourth grade, but I know we've got amazing fourth grade teachers who are digging into it almost on a weekly basis.
So we're working on it.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I'm sure somewhere out of all that discussion, there'll be best practices to be passed along
Absolutely.
as well. At the top of the page, you talked about VLO students weren't all able to be assessed, and yet it seems to me like our VLO students would be a really important group to be able to assess with being remote all year. Is that parental support? Is that, what is the issue that made that happen?
So it's really the process of how that assessment goes. So typically students come into school and they're assessed either on paper or electronically. We use all digital. And they did have a remote testing system that they devised. It's not foolproof. So you can imagine a second grade student working remotely as they're being tested, who are very responsive to their co-teacher or their parent who's right there, or there's questions and answers and looking up, is this right? Those kind of things, just because it's natural, they're kids. We saw a lot of fluctuations in testing from our VLO students. For our second round of testing, we did not do the remote testing. We asked students to come into school in a very safe, sanitized environment, but there were plenty of parents who said that's not appropriate for my child. I'm worried about that. So we're just,
Still not
validity
comfortable
is
with
just,
it.
it's hard to
Right.
guarantee that.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense to me, but if we're going to continue the VLO program, it seems to me like that's an area we need to make some improvement in.
Absolutely.
We've been talking about this as a comment, negative impact on K through 2 reading and that early literacy intervention and what we need to be doing differently. And I don't see that necessarily as part of this year. I see that as a long-term, we need to do better.
Yeah, we agree with that, especially at the more closer to the kindergarten grade level. Not that second's not important, but as we have talked recently, if you catch it early enough, hopefully numbers improve as they get older.
Absolutely agree with that. Decline in K through 8 math, consistent with national trends and current research. Just a comment, one of the things, and then parents are less able to support math instruction during remote learning. So one of the things I think we've heard for a long time is I have no clue how to help them with this math homework. And not being facetious or anything, but I think that's something we need parent supports in place for that.
Right.
And I think we would hear that consistently, particularly in elementary.
It's interesting you bring that up because, we built this VLO curriculum out, which is really, can be a great support for our teachers. And a lot of our in-person teachers have said they've started to use that. And there are these really great tutorials. So all of a sudden we have thousands of lessons developed by our best teachers, giving a 10 or 15 minute description of how they teach that math concept. And now we have our in-person teachers sending those home to parents and saying, I explained this in school, but here is Mrs. Jones, who does an amazing job teaching this. If you want some support on that, which is a total great byproduct of all the work that we've been doing. So we have a number of teachers who have commented, say, like, I use that all the time in class and with my parents. So I hear you. I think that's exactly right. And I think that's something we have to keep working on.
Yeah, and yes, and there's also third-party tutors that we've been talking to in terms of what are options for kids, like phone a friend if a kid's on at 11 o'clock at night, type of a program. So we're having those discussions too. It's
a great idea. There's probably sighs of relief going up across the district because you're thinking about those things. So thank you. That's good to hear. First semester failures are significantly higher than in previous years. And you've talked a lot in this document about the summer tutoring and all that. Is there any immediate intervention happening? Again, as Kelly referenced, we have anybody in danger of graduation, not graduating, or trying to bring some of those Fs up out of the water?
Right, we have, well, a lot of that is credit recovery. So we typically do credit recovery, but we've done it on tenfold this second semester. Hired additional tutoring staff. That's that group that I talked about. Every student who is in danger of failing has a coach or a mentor who's meeting with them on a weekly basis to check in on that progress. We're tracking the credit recovery of all of those students through online credit recovery models we've got. We've created a couple of new classes at the 9th and 10th grade called wraparound classes to be able to teach that what we just failed in that second semester, to be able to return that credit as quickly as possible. So we are on top of it right now. We wish we weren't in that position. And a lot of it we've talked about in the future is prevention. So how do we not get in that position again? So that's literally every single week. That's all we're talking about with our team, is how do we support those students?
I very much value the proactive approach and not letting our kids get to that point. Obviously, like you said, Matt, it's been a unique year.
Right.
And my final question for you, when you were talking about the learning recovery and extended plan, you said you hope the parents will trust you enough in order to bring their kids in this summer for tutoring or whatever intervention they need. What specific strategies are we utilizing so the parents are comfortable with that? What are we doing to actually reach out? I know we have great community liaisons.
Mhm.
What are we doing to build that trust to help parents be comfortable with doing that?
It's a good question. So much of our work at this point has been designing the systems and the numbers and the logistics. And I think from this point forward, we do a lot of the getting in and making it happen. It's a good challenge for us and our team, is to really think, I don't think we've gone down that path yet. What are those strategies we can implement? What's our plan to make sure we get every single student? So challenge accepted.
And quite honestly, we wanted to bring it forward here tonight before we got too far ahead of ourselves.
And I appreciate that, but we know that relationships matter a lot. We have some good staff that maybe could help in that aspect of it.
Absolutely.
If we can't get the kids to the table, we can't help them. So thank you. Appreciate the work.
Yep, you're welcome.
And I think you stated that they all often have a key relationship with a staff member and that you would utilize those key relationships. I think that will be a
Yep.
key part of those strategies. But another question on you mentioned a lot of this testing, it sounds like, happened when they very first got back into school at the beginning of the year, which again was before we had the opportunity to have our hands on them for very long. At this point, I know we typically have done a midpoint check in like January or so of some additional map testing. Did we have the opportunity to do that this year? Or are we just going to be doing spring map testing this year?
We did do winter map testing. We typically target that winter map testing to our, what we call tier 2 and tier 3, our students who are in intervention. So we know if those interventions are working, and we've done that. We've gathered the data. I haven't included it on here because it's not really apples to apples.
Sure.
But that's what we're using with those intervention teams and what we call MTSS teams at the building level. So it's not apples to apples to say, are we making growth for everybody?
But have you seen positive gains within those groups
Yes,
that you
we
were
are.
hoping to see gains?
Yeah. And I'm happy to share some of that information too, as we process that.
I just wanted to say, first off, kudos to you and your team. I mean, this is an incredible amount of work, and the fact that you've been nose deep in this since the beginning of the year, or even before that, that's incredible. And the layout of this is wonderful. I love how it just has the analysis and the response and kind of clearly articulating what you're doing. So thank you for that. I personally, and you don't have to answer this tonight, but I would love to know, how has this influenced the design of VLO in the future? I know you're looking at how we're going to operate VLO moving forward, and there's a ton of lessons that we've learned through the pandemic, going from a state where everybody was VLO at one point in the spring to giving the option to now redesigning it and saying, what might this look like as we move forward? And so at some point, I would just, love to hear a little bit about, as we move forward to VLO, these are the things that we want to shift, we want to change based on the data and what we know to be true. When you talk about engaged and unengaged students, what kind of guardrails have we put in place to ensure that the students that are going into VLO have the proper supports and things like that. But outside of that, I think that, I always think every number has a name and every name has a story. And what I can hear from you is that you're getting to the story. And I think that that's that whole goal of our personalization on our strategic plan. So well done to you leading the team, and to Matt and everybody working on this. It's great work.
Thanks. And we'd be happy to dig into VLO and on the future and everything else. And
Yeah.
Mrs. Heidenreich has done an amazing job leading that
Sure.
initiative, and not for tonight, but we've got a ton of success to talk about there also.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I'd
would
love
love
to
to
hear.
piggyback on that with do we think, or do we see going into what, I know VLO registration is open, is the majority of VLO students, do we believe next year going to be students who want to learn distantly? It has nothing to do with the pandemic and not coming back. But because I know our goal has always been for VLO to continue and to be that entity for people who want that. Do we have any indication as registration is happening, if those are who's signing up, or if we still have people that are nervous about the pandemic and
Looks like it's
coming
about
back?
50-50.
Okay.
People who are choosing that and people who are still concerned. So
Okay.
What are the current number registered for next year?
I looked at it today, I think 215, 220 or so.
Okay.
That's K-12. It's open for another 2 weeks, with spring break being in the middle of that.
And one more VLO question, and you don't, again, have to answer this tonight, but are we looking at VLO as being more of its own, for lack of a better word, school? So if you're in VLO, you won't have a homeschool. VLO will be your homeschool.
Correct.
Okay.
But the state is not allowing for a different IRN for that. So
Right.
their scores will still go back with their homeschool.
Correct. So from a user perspective, it looks like it's its own school.
Correct.
On the back end, as we manage the data, similar to the academy,
Mhm.
that information goes back there. We can still send emails and information that way. But as a entity, it looks like its own school, functions like that. Students coming from different schools to one grade.
So if you happen to be in Van Gordon's attendance zone and you do VLO in 5th grade, you might have a teacher who was at Independence or something. like
Correct.
that. Dedicated VLO teacher.
Right. And we've done, we just finished last night 2 rounds of information sessions with interested parents.
Yeah.
Haven't had a ton of questions out there because we've done a lot of preloading of that.
Right. You've done a lot of work on that. Chris has done a great job on that.
Yes.
We appreciate all of this, Keith. It is a little overwhelming, but it's good to have it on paper and be able to.
Maybe as we look at upcoming work sessions, I think this would be a great just topic to explore. And again, I would love to hear the learnings, the positive things that came out of VLO, and then the shifts that we're making. Just so we're all knowledgeable, sounds like we went from 4,000 back at the beginning, right? Close to it, to about 2,000 at semester break. Is that about right?
About 3,000 right now.
About 3,000, and we've got about 200 something. So it'd just be good to hear.
Yeah, we can add that in to
Yep.
look at another work session.
Be happy to.
Any other questions? I'm sorry, Julie.
One more. And it's my understanding we invited some of our VLO students to come back at the break who hadn't been highly engaged in the VLO platform.
Correct.
Have they been more engaged in in-person learning and had
I
more
think-
success in?
Absolutely, they
academics?
have been.
Okay.
A lot of conversations with parents were, I think parents were assuming that things were happening. And when we had those conversations, I think the parents were very grateful to have us reach out and bring the kids back in person. So great.
You'll see also, just really fast, you'll see MTSS in there that Keith referenced. So that's something that's been going on, that it will continue to build out. And there are a lot of people working on that, and that'll be really good for Lakota in the coming years, I think. And then also, as Keith mentioned, the governor's requested a plan, not required, but requested the plan by April 1st. So we'll send it to him, I guess, tomorrow.
And Jenny, if we plan forward with the VLO, it would be great too to understand from just a finance perspective, when we think about VLO for the upcoming year, can we use ESSER funds for that? Or is there going to be an increased budget allotment that we need to put towards because we're operating another school? Just kind of understanding the financial impact of continuing to offer VLO.
Yeah, it would be an allowable expense.
Okay.
And I think for us and the executive team, what we've been trying to do is list all of those things that we believe would be ESSER worthy, basically, and prioritize those things. And also have in mind when we're talking about that, the sustainability piece,
Right.
because there's some of these things, and we've talked about some of these things, like, is this something just for the learning loss and the disruption and will sunset in a few years? Or is this something that we really need in place and is going to continue
Right.
after this? And so those are the conversations that we are having and will be ongoing. And once we have things better, put in a better format,
Sure.
we
Yeah.
we will absolutely share it. But yeah.
I didn't want to
it's one
put
of
you on the
those-
spot. That wasn't, and we aren't here for
No,
the
we're-
LO conversation. It just kind of went that way. So we
No,
appreciate it.
because the ESSER funds and all, it is one big conversation.
Right.
Absolutely, Brad. So.
And the
yeah.
sustainability piece, we don't want to put something in place that when the ESSER funds go away, that we can't
And it's a
sustain.
one-time shot.
Yeah.
And I also wonder with the VLO expense or if that's also saving us money on K-12 tuition and those offsets. So there's that piece as well.
There is.
Yeah, this past year, while we saw that a lot of our students taking advantage and wanting to choose the VLO option, we also saw an increase in students who were choosing an online school outside of Lakota too.
Hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that this
Right.
next school year too.
Right.
And the quality of programming obviously makes a big difference, and whether or not we're a school of choice to provide that.
Right.
Can we also get by next meeting some broader understanding of our staffing changes this year and how many staff we've added? Just to understand the impact cost wise.
And I believe when, yes, I believe that's a document that we have shared with you, but we probably have not
And
gone,
updated,
we probably have not done a deep dive into that.
right?
So we can do that.
Thank you.
I do want to reiterate too, that both of these documents will be on our website tomorrow, but we wanted to get in front of you first.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Again,
thanks.
Keith, thank you.
Thank you,
And
Keith.
thank
Thank
you to
you.
your team.
Thank
We
you.
very much appreciate that. We've reached the point in the meeting for public comments. We will start if there's anybody in person that has a public comment. State your name and your address and you'll have 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Rich Watson, 9519 Twin Valley Court. My address, my concerns actually been addressed, but I actually have something relevant to your talk. My daughter has actually been an A student. But
Excuse me, would you mind speaking into your mic? Yeah, thank you.
My daughter has been an A student, but for whatever reason, this semester she did not engage. So I basically, fortunately, her teachers were on it. I get this thing 3 weeks into the semester, she's basically flunking everything. So due to a ton of hard work by the teachers, specifically Mr. Dooley for government, Mrs. Regal for math, Mr. Campbell for mechatronics, and her counselor, Mrs. Osborne, she was basically, it took 6 weeks of working her butt off, but she actually got them up to A's. So, I mean, you guys do have a plan and it does work. So I mean, as a parent, I mean, honestly, I had no clue she was like that. So if you guys hadn't have done what you did, this little quarter would have been much worse than it was. So thank you very much.
Thank
That's
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Adam, do we have anybody online? Okay. All right, at this point, I'm going to need a motion to enter into executive session with legal counsel concerning disputes that are the subject of pending or imminent court action and preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Jenny, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. O'Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Pearl,
Yes.
Mr. Lovell,
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Casper.
Yes.
Okay, I am pulling us back out of executive session and we're back into our open meeting part, and I would like a motion for adjournment, please.
So, I'll second.
Second, Jenny, can you call the roll?
Mrs. O'Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Lovell,
Yes.
Mr. Pearl.
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer. Yes. Mrs. Casper.
Yes. Thank you all.